right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mogul Marathon Commercial Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Yannick Cudjoe-Virgil, and I'm very, very excited for our guest today. Today, we have a guest that is experienced in underwriting, deal structuring, geographic focuses, and he has an accounting background. And so today's guest is Stewart Heath. Now, Stewart is the CEO of Harvard Grace Capital and a seasoned real estate investor of over 20 plus years. As I mentioned, he has an accounting background and his experience stems out of commercial real estate, development, construction management. He has an expertise in office. So welcome to today's show, Stewart Heath. Stewart, thanks for being on today's show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be able to speak to you and your guests. Thank you.
So before we jump into today's, show, give our listeners a little bit of insight behind who you are and how you got to where you are today.
As he said, I am a CPA. I've practiced for about 37 years now. So it makes me a really old guy, certainly the oldest one on this podcast. And I used to watch clients, certainly not a get-rich-quick scheme, but just generally build wealth over 5-10 years, investing in and out of real estate. And honestly, early part of my career, I really had an incorrect point of view on it. And I knew that they would do things that I sort of turned my nose up on. And just, I would never do that, that kind of stuff. And in the middle of tax season, about 2000, I just sort of threw up my hands. I was exhausted. I was working 20 hours a day, realizing that I was making good money, but I wasn't building any wealth. And literally watched a late night infomercial one time. It was about buying real estate. I said, well, why not? What have I got to lose? And I had several great role models that were my clients, some of whom are some of my largest investors today. And so I bought a duplex in a not so great part of town. And it turns out I kind of liked it. I liked interacting with the tenants. I liked meeting their needs. I liked fixing little things. And I mean, I like making money more than that, but I just had I just loved everything about it, and realizing that so long as the tenants did what they did and I did what I was supposed to do, that asset was going to generate capital, generate wealth over time. And sure enough, it did. I bought it for $55,000. About 10 years later, sold it for $120,000. We did pump $25K in there along the way, but still a really great return on that tiny little property. And sometimes, as one of my mentors told me, you just got to get into the game. You're not going to see anything happen if you're standing on the sidelines. So that's how I got started. And then I got into it in a big way. About 9 months after I bought that first property, I bought a basket of our portfolio of 14 duplexes north of Nashville. Then I got in with a partner. We started building houses. Then I started buying up condominiums in one complex. I was looking for big portfolios that were all close to each other. And ultimately, by the end of 2005, had accumulated about 200 personal rentals. We started developing office condos in Franklin, Tennessee, and then one of these condo complexes where I had bought all the units. We were renovating those and trying to resell those. Condos were very popular, 2006, 2007. And then the market started to change. I had 72 of those condos, and I sold 28 of them in one weekend after we had rehabbed them. And then I didn't sell another one for over a year. And that was 2007, 2008, the last time the world changed before 2020. So then I spent the next couple of years uh, giving everything back to the banks. Didn't really come out of there alive, and got some lessons that we can talk about from that. And then started getting back. Never ever left my love for real estate. Went back and took a few corporate jobs for a few years, and had a few other residential rentals along the way, and then started getting big time into commercial in 2021. So that's my story, and sort of the genesis of Harvard Grace Capital.
That's fantastic. So what was the biggest lesson that you learned coming out of the last financial crisis? I think a lot of people, a lot of veteran real estate investors, would say that they, sort of earned their stripes, coming out of that, and maybe they're still practicing real estate. But from your perspective, what was the biggest lesson that you learned coming out of the last crash?
I would say some people earned their stripes because they were smarter than I was. I'm a CPA, absolutely no better. I was what they call equity stepping. I'd hold a property for about a year, refinance it, take that cash, go buy something else, and grew the portfolio that way. I probably had all told $5K of real hard equity in that entire portfolio, which is just stupid. Well, I mean, it's not stupid if you've got reserves to back it up. So lesson number one, you're not a prophet. Don't assume that you know what's going to happen, because nobody thought the world would just, the financial world would just stop spinning. And that's exactly what happened in 2008. And I had a plan. I was going to resell those 72 condos. I was going to net $5 million. I was going to pay off all my other rentals and then have a debt-free portfolio and just sort of grow it from there. Well, the world changed before that happened. And even when I saw it, I sort of took confirmation of my plan when that one weekend we sold 28 condos. I had 26 ready for market, and so I sold all of those and took 2 pre-sales. I'm like, great, I am the smartest guy in the world, and so just listen, learn, and prepare for the downside. I was just completely not prepared for the downside. Had I had 300 to 500K in reserves, I probably could have carried a $25 million portfolio for 12 months and probably still have some of those assets, frankly. But I didn't. And so that's what I've learned. So lesson number one, don't be stupid, because that's what I was doing. And you must prepare for the downside.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of investors can point out different things that they've learned in the last financial crisis, whether it's being over leveraged, maybe not looking at comps too well, whatever the case may be. But I think the fundamentals behind real estate or commercial real estate in general behooves you to have reserves, right?
Yeah.
And that's no different from doing a value add project, C-class property versus a self-storage property. You just never know when things are going to happen. I mean, I think in today's environment, it's really very true when we're talking about interest rates that have skyrocketed, astronomically over the past 12 months, and people can't get out of their properties or can't, service their debt, right? I think reserves is definitely a 100%, point that I think anyone that's getting into this space or is currently in this space should never overlook when they're looking at, acquisitions or looking to buy properties.
Yeah. It's a basic personal financial planning. It's the foundation of your personal, the emergency fund. It's no different in business. So what I was doing was gambling. I will say, I don't think I overpaid for anything. I was getting properties at good discounts. It didn't matter, if you couldn't carry it, because I was pretty close to being 100% leveraged. So I was clearly over leveraged. That's mistake number 2. So, but I had a lot of willing banks willing to help me on that journey until, their world stopped too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you mentioned something about discounts, which leads me to my next question. Um, how are you looking at today's environment, given the fact that I think that there are discounts available in the market?
Yeah.
We talk about how interest rates are, a huge factor in commercial real estate and the ability for someone to pay for a specific asset as it relates to the cash flow that they're going to receive. We're seeing in the market that prices, on average, I think across, all commercial real estate asset classes are down 15%. What's your outlook in the market today? And, what are you excited about from an opportunity perspective?
Uh, I agree. Prices are down. Even in the hot markets, activity has slowed down. I don't know that they're down 15% in my area, but but right now we are very opportunistic. I would say we kind of always have been. I don't know that a conservative or disciplined approach to underwriting really changes based upon interest rates, because at the end of the day, we're just looking. All pretty much all we do is stabilized cash flowing properties. So interest rates certainly dictates what we're willing to pay for a property. At the end of the day, we're looking for um, you know a minimum 5% cash on cash yield, after a 1.2 times debt service coverage on a property, and so yeah, the property we're closing 2 weeks from now, we're buying that $1 million below asking price. But we've been dancing with that seller since before Thanksgiving, and it took them a little bit of time to convince them that the market wasn't going to meet their price, and so it's a bit of a turnaround type situation. But there is enough there to cash flow a little bit, and we've already got one tenant that's going in to fill up one of the, so it's going to be cash flow from day one. But as opposed to the two deals we did last year, first deal we did at 3.25%. Second deal we did at 5.39%. This one's at 7.5%, and we're feeling pretty good about that at the moment. But that has driven the price. So we underwrite a lot of deals. We make a lot of offers. We get very few acceptances, because people aren't ready to take the hit. And so what we're excited about is more of this. I think Q3 of this year, and probably last 12 or 18 months, there's going to be a lot of properties on the market that cannot refinance. Either they've been poorly managed, they've not structured their leases to be flexible with the market, and these are mainly long-term commercial leases. That doesn't apply to our storage business because we can change the rate in 30 days there. But this applies to our office properties. A lot of people got lazy with near 0% interest rates, or in the twos and threes and fours, and low inflation, and they didn't have good CAM clauses in their leases. They didn't have any kind of flexibility, and so some of those properties are what I call, they're just locked in prison until those leases mature. But we're willing to come in and buy them at a price, and then we will restructure those leases appropriately to be market based, which will give us a pretty good pop in value 3 to 4 years down the road. All the while, we're getting some cash flow, so we're pretty excited about those opportunities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think, to the start point of what you were saying, I think, how we look at deals is that the fundamentals never change, right? The fundamentals of underwriting, the fundamentals of evaluating risk. And there's a lot of talk about, people saying that, oh, they're just going to be on the sidelines and kind of wait until the market, changes. When I would argue that now is a great time. I mean, able to get, I mean, case in point, right? You're getting a property for $1 million less than value, right? I
Yeah.
think today is the best time to get into real estate, and you should really be looking at it from the fact that interest rates are just a byproduct of just investing, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily it certainly impacts your ability to pay on price, but it should never be just a deterrent of you deploying capital. Because if you're able to buy a deal today at a 15 to 20% discount, and it makes sense from a cash flow perspective, you do the deal, right? And I think in today's
Exactly.
environment,
Exactly. And
yeah,
if you find a deal that works today at 7 or 8%, hey, 24 months from now, you're likely going to be able to refi that at 5 and pull cash out tax free and go do some other deals, because interest rates are just a variable in the market. But you're right. If the deal works, you do the deal. You know,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. And another thing too, I think in today's environment, I think the investors who have the access to low cost of capital as well, are the ones who can truly win in today's environment. And whether that can be cash, that can be maybe assuming the note. If you put that on top of acquiring a property at a good basis, I mean, that's really what all real estate investors want, right?
that's right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. What's the old saying? The best time to get into real estate was 5 years ago. The second best time is today. Uh, not to be flippant about it, but yeah, I referred to something my mentor told me. I said that earlier. You have to get into the game. I mean, you're a professional athlete. You know exactly what that means. I mean, you're not going to perform unless you're actually in the game, and you get so not to go in there stupid. Don't go in there and do something reckless. But you're not going to do much with your investing if you're sitting and waiting for the opportunity, because likely while you're waiting, the market's moving past you.
100%. So talk about your firm's, main investment criteria and what you guys look for, on deals, right? You mentioned, some retail. I think, I know that you do some office as well. Talk about that as it relates to, the current market. Let's say from an office perspective, right? Everything, it seems like, on the headlines, people are saying like office is just tanking, it's down like crazy. But you're doing suburban office, right? Um,
Yep. And
Give our
medical
listeners a
office.
little bit of
Yeah.
insight as to like why you're still doing office in this environment.
Yeah. So, you know, yeah. Gee, I hope this show's not for children, because you just used a dirty word, office. Um, it, there's about 6 different subcategories of office. And I think the office subcategory that is in trouble is suburban Class A and central business district Class A office. Uh, Medical office is not in trouble. Quote, suburban Class B office is not in trouble. At least, and first and foremost, all real estate is local. And the first deal we did was an office deal, and we closed that one in January of 22, when office was a bad word then. I remember talking to California. Some of the country was still locked down then, and office, are you crazy? It's like, look, in the South, we kind of pretended that there was no pandemic from about June of 2020 on. Everybody kept coming to the office. But suburban Class B office, where doctors are and dentists are and mortgage companies are, and your doctor is not going remote, and he's not coming to your house, so he has to have a place to go see you, for you to go see him. And places like mortgage companies they legally have to have an office space. Whether you do everything online or what, they legally have to have a space. So those kind of consumer-facing businesses, they're going to have space. A lot of people say, well, you should just call that retail. Yeah, I get that. But I mean, technically, it's suburban Class B office. It's the Class A where the really nice stuff, with the marble countertops and the very fancy bathrooms and stuff like in downtown areas and in submarine. That's what I think is going to struggle. I don't know that a lot of other office types are going to struggle. Certainly not those two. I mean, there is a portfolio of 1 million square feet in our target area of Class A office that's for sale. And I haven't even downloaded the offering memorandum. I mean, a year or so ago, I probably would have been all over that. But, not right now, because that's not something we want to look at. You asked about our firm. So we distinguish ourselves two ways. Harvard Grace Capital, we are not asset class focused. We are geographically focused. I'm in the center of our geography. I call it the 840-565 corridor, which is essentially south of Nashville and Middle Tennessee down through northern Alabama, centered on Huntsville. Huntsville's sort of the major heartbeat of this area. It's a defense contracting hub. It has doubled in size in the last 10 years, and that doesn't seem to be slowing down. And a lot of that is government, military, as well as industrial focused. Toyota Mazda just hired 10,000 people at a new plant they opened up a year ago where they're building engines together. So there's a lot of economic factors going on in what generally here people call the Tennessee Valley. We know it. We live here. And our rule of thumb is we like things that we can get to within an hour. And the other differentiator is we manage everything that we sponsor and buy. So we're doing the property management. Nothing against third-party property managers. They're great people. We've had bad experience with them. I kind of think the model is broken unless the property is really, really large. And there's plenty of budget there to hire and keep good people as managers. But we're kind of in the under $10 million asset market. And 5%, even 10% of rents is not an earth-shattering amount of money to keep a quality manager focused on that. We're investors. We've also sold the whole deal to investors. So we have a vested interest to deliver on that business plan. And so we manage it ourselves. We don't make any money doing that. We do take a market rate, but trust me, we're underwater on that every month. But that's okay because we've got the back end in mind. So that's kind of what we do at Harvard Grace.
That's fantastic. So are you guys syndicating these opportunities, or how are you guys putting together the equity?
We're syndicating. We all invest in all of our deals either as Harvard Grace or as the Harvard Grace principals, and then we syndicate out to other investors as well. Traditionally, it's been with people that we have known 25 years or more, but every time we do a deal, we meet some new people and we get new investors each time we do a deal.
And I guess I'm curious too, given all the headlines that are going on in the office space, have you seen any pushback from a capital raising perspective, as it relates to just office in general, or are your investors more, do they understand the dynamics, the geographical dynamics between real estate as a whole versus, what they're seeing on the headlines as well?
Yeah, certainly with people who we've known less long, which is office. I said medical office. So in this go round, it's a small deal. They were asking $2.5 million, and we got it for $1.5 million. But we're oversubscribed on that one now, 25%. We came in and we did 60% loan to value on it, and we raised $900,000 to have 2 years worth of reserves on the deal, and we're oversubscribed by a substantial amount, and some of that is my own fault. But we now have plans for that overfunding. But so yes, certainly in talking, if they're only half listening, they hear the word office, well, no, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. So a little bit of pushback, but the investors that I know well, um, you know, they listen and they understand that there are subcategories to office, and it's not, most people you come to realize that all real estate is local. Um, Even though I'm not pursuing that big portfolio of Class A office in Huntsville, um, the occupancy on that office is in the 90s. I don't know what the weighted average lease term is on those, but defense contractors are one of these special class of tenants where, like during the pandemic, a lot of times they're working on things that are top secret, and those things can only be worked on in what's called a SCIF. That stands for something, but it's a you know it's a top secret room where there's no mobile devices allowed and no internet, and you do all the work in there, and so those employees are going to that office, and so remote is not an option for them. So I don't think that Class A office is going to have a hard time in Huntsville, but I think it's going to have a dip, and we're not interested in playing in that game. We might watch that and see if there's some opportunities this time next year for some of those assets.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Real estate is always going to be, very, very local as opposed to what you're going to hear on the headlines. And, for any of our listeners who are interested in just getting into real estate or are listening or trying to expand their markets, I think, focusing on just the localities behind the market drivers that would actually prop up or add value to your your real estate, investment opportunity, I think is the focus there.
Yeah.
Stewart, you've been in this space for a very, very long time. I know that you were able to get through the last financial recession, but you've been on this marathon for quite some time. If there was one thing that you can turn back and look back and say, if I would have done this one thing differently, I maybe would be in a different place. Or I guess the question is, what is one thing that you think you should have done differently that would contribute to your success today?
Um, Other than having reserves, I would say be patient. If you're starting to build your portfolio, just do it in a rational and reasonable way. I was trying to become independently wealthy in about 36 months. And I was in a big, big, big hurry. Um, and just be patient. Any kind of investing, whether it's real estate or otherwise, is for the most part a lifelong journey. And you do things that you think make sense. Some of them will be absolute home runs. Others may putter out, and you might lose everything. But if you invest wisely, that's not going to take you down. So be patient. That's what I would tell myself 30 years ago.
That's great advice. Stewart, if our listeners want to follow you, stay in touch with you, get in touch with you, follow some of your investments, what's the best way for our listeners to stay in touch?
Best way to get to me is through the website, Harvard Grace Capital. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. If you go to our website, navigate over to the resources tab, and we have a resource over there, which if you are looking to passively invest, there's a checklist for questions you should ask your real estate sponsor that will prompt you to join our email list, which we would love to have you on that as well. You can also find my Calendly link on the website, and I would be happy to talk with any of you anytime about real estate, because I just love talking about it. So we would be happy to talk with you.
That's fantastic. Well, Stewart, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. You grace us with your knowledge of the importance of having reserves, given your trials and tribulations through the last financial crisis, your expertise on office, Just a lot of things that I think people just need to hear about what's happening today and then also what they need to plan for in the future. So thank you again for being a guest on our show. Thank you to all of our listeners out there for tuning in to another episode of the Mogul Marathon Commercial Real Estate Podcast. Let's be great, take action, and remember that real estate is a marathon, not a sprint. So run your own race. Thanks again, Stuart.
Thanks for having me. Such an honor.